Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Hatsu 2024 starts in just a few days, which means it's time for the first tier list of the new year. I waited longer to put this out than I would have preferred in order to get as much injury information as possible, but unfortunately we still have a lot of question marks. We'll talk about them as we go. Alright, we got 42 guys to rank, so let's get into it. Let's start with the top two. Terunofuji takes his usual spot as an S-level injury risk, and Kirishima goes all the way to the top. Teru takes this slot as he always does, mainly out of respect for being the Yokozuna. He should always be considered S tier if he can fight the full 15 and fight them reasonably well. However, at this point in time, even as fully functional as we're going to get, Terunofuji may not be able to beat Kirishima in a basho. Now, I don't mean in the one-on-one match, I mean in the overall record, but still, Kiri has as much of a chance to win this basho no matter what Teru does, as Teru does. Now, if you've been watching these tier lists, the fact that I have them both considered S tier might seem a little odd. After all, S's must pick all formats, and in a lot of formats, especially for Yukachi Clash players, Yokozuna and Ozeki are in the same bracket, so you can't pick them both. How does this work? Basically, Kirishima should be considered S tier over the Ozeki at the very least. He should 100% be considered as the guy in that group of three to get the best record the vast majority of the time. Teru, like I said, I put him at S because Yokozuna, but also in pretty much every other format, any format where you could pick Teru and Kirishima, you can pick Teru if you think he's going to go the full 15 days, because Terunofuji is going to get at least 10 wins, probably 11, maybe 12 or more, regardless of the state he's in, if he's in a good enough position, a good enough health state to go the full 15. And it's not unreasonable to view him as akin to Hakuho in the basho where Teru earned his Yokozuna title. Hakuho came back, he had one last run at it, he pushed Teru, he actually beat Teru, but of course Teru won every other match, went 14-1 and earned the rope anyway. Teru could be viewing this as a situation where he wants to do the same thing for Kirishima, sort of pass the torch more actively. However, at this point in time, it is still not official that Teru is going to fight. It looks like he's going to make that decision at the last minute, as he has theoretically done for the last few bashos, but he has been talking as though he is getting ready to fight, as though he wants to fight. The odds of him taking part in this one are higher than they have been in the last few, but he's still very much a risk whether he's going to fight or not, and if he does, how long he's going to last. So Teru maintains his rank of respect, but Kirishima at this point is really the man. Next, Hoshoryu, A tier. I realize I've been B tiering a lot of guys who are capable of getting 10 wins because I feel like that's the safer bet, but I'm not putting Hoshoryu here just to make things more interesting. I think he should be expected to get 10 wins. The main reason is this. There are 7 other guys in the Sanyaku. Even if we're assuming Terunofuji fights, there's only 7 other guys there. That means that Hoshoryu is going to fight all the way down to Maegashira 3 West at a minimum. Who in that group do you really think poses that much of a threat? He has an excellent record against everybody in that group except Atamifuji, because they only fought the one time, and lifetime Midorifuji, but he's turned that around in a big way. He's 2-0 against Gonoyama, but he's looked strong in those matches, and if he gets down into the Maegashira 4 guys, he's really good against Tobizaru and Shodai generally. Furthermore, as the third ranked guy, as the Ozeki 1 West, his toughest matchups will come at the end. However, if he's set to test guys who are in the Maegashira ranks but contending, who are the most likely options there? Well, one is Asanoyama, and he has been beating Asanoyama's ass. 2 is Onosato. Onosato is very physically dominant, but he has holes in his game, and Hoshoryu should be able to take advantage. The other one would be Kotoshouho. Kotoshouho, unbelievably, is 4-0 against Hoshoryu. Now, the last time they fought was 3.5 years ago, so that's not meaningful in any real way. In fact, it has sort of a Midorifuji look where Hoshoryu has all this trouble against the guy, and then as he's gotten better, now he's just the better wrestler. So any replacement fights for the Sanyaku guys he's supposed to face, if he's used to test contenders, should be to his advantage. And I think, if nothing else, that's going to make the difference. 10 wins should be expected. Yeah, he could finish with 9, but I think 9 is an absolute floor for him. 10 wins, lock it in, Hoshoryu's doing it. Takakeisho, B, injury risk. This is just kind of where he sits now. As I said in my predictions, I think he's going to hang out at Ozeki all year. I have now found out he's thinking about taking this tournament off. So that's creating something of a question mark for the prediction, although I do think if he takes this one off, he'll come back in March and do fine. But he's just not a 10-win guy anymore. Obviously, I think he can still maintain a winning record at this level, and I think he will if he fights a full 15. But he's always a risk now with his neck. If his knees act up again, he's just falling apart. The prediction I made for him holding Ozeki this year, even if he does it, this is the last year where I would be the least bit confident in him being able to do that. Huge injury risk all the time. If you pick him in your fantasy games as your Ozeki of choice because he's your favorite or because you have some kind of sentimental reason, that's cool, do your thing. If you're doing it tactically, like that you think he's the most competitive option, you are absolutely trolling. Kotonowaka, A tier, but I was playing with putting him at S. He is unquestionably the Sekiwake / Komusubi with the most potential to do really well. He should end up with the best record in the group. The main reason I'm not putting him at S is because a lot of games are where you have to pick a Sekiwake or a Komusubi, and in this case, Takayasu could challenge him for that best record. I think Kotonowaka is much more likely to have a good record than Daieisho, but Takayasu might be able to catch up. That is the only reason he's not S tier. In most games, anything where you can pick him that isn't bracket based, anything where you just need flat wins, he should be on your short list of guys to pick. He's coming into his own. He's gonna be an Ozeki soon. Just ride this train. Daieisho, B tier. There's not much to say here. Daieisho has shown himself to be a very legitimate Sekiwake level wrestler, but not really an Ozeki level wrestler, which means you should count on him to get winning records at this level for as long as his body holds up, but it's very unlikely that he's gonna do routinely double-digit wins and chase Ozeki very often. I know he had quote-unquote Ozeki runs in the past, but even then it never really felt like he was that likely to get there. It was just mathematically possible. So he's a safe winning record to lean on, but in bracket games you want Kotonowaka. If you just need flat wins though, he's a pretty good choice. Takayasu, B, injury tier. Takayasu is very capable of getting to 10 wins. However, his injury woes seem to flare up more when he is facing a lot of top competition, which makes some sense. Even though he has been in the full 15 days for the last 3 tournaments, and I think he can do it again, he's always a little bit of a question mark. I think he's arguably A, injury risk, but this one I'm going to play it a little bit safe. I think he's definitely, if he gets to the full 15, we should absolutely expect a winning record out of him, but because he can get through the 15 a little bit gimpy sometimes, we should not necessarily expect 10 wins, even if he looks okay. But a winning record, count on that one. If you're playing a game where you have to pick between the Komusubi, Takayasu is the easy choice. Ura, D tier. You know the deal. He's my boy. I want to see him do well. I'm happy to be wrong here. But being a Komusubi is a lot different than being a Maegashira 1. We saw what happened to Hokutofuji. We saw what happened to Nishikigi. The Komusubi schedule stays hard. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It doesn't matter if you're struggling. They're still gonna give you tough guys all the way till the very end when you're just not helping anyone by fighting anyone who's doing any kind of good. Ura got absolutely smoked by the Sanyaku overall in November. The Kotonowaka win was great, and I'm not saying he's going to go winless against the other Sanyaku here, but the start he's going to have at Komusubi 1 West, frankly, if he doesn't have 8 losses by day 10, we as Ura fans should call that a small win. If he's got 4 wins by day 10, he might even be able to pull off the 8 and 7. But you look at the Sanyaku, then you look at the Maegashira 1 guys, who are Wakamotoharu and Atamifuji, and it just doesn't look good. Any kind of Kachikoshi for Ura would be a miracle. I'm hoping for that miracle, but we cannot count on it. Wakamotoharu, C+. I initially put him at B tier. I think he's a very high C+ tier. The only reason I'm not really sold on him definitely getting a winning record is because everything seemed to fall apart in November, and at Maegashira 1, his schedule isn't going to be that much different. He's still got to face all of the top guys, and in fact, he's got to face them early. For example, Terunofuji is going to be his day 2 opponent if Teru is in the tournament. That's probably not great for his overall record. Yes, at Maegashira 1, if you're struggling, your schedule will get easier a little bit quicker, but that's a very thin line to walk to say, okay, if he does well against Sanyaku, he'll get a winning record, but if he does poorly in just the right way, he'll also face just the right Maegashira guys to finish with a winning record anyway. I think he's 85 to 90% odds to get a winning record, but it's not a given. I am not comfortable putting him at B tier. Atamifuji, I am comfortable putting him at B tier. Even though there have been reports that he's looking a little heavy, maybe his shoulder is a little bit of a problem, he's done extremely well on his return to Makuuchi. He's had 2 tournaments and done unbelievably in both of them. And he does well against some of the top guys. He beat Hoshoryu, he beat Takayasu, he beat Abi when Abi was having a good tournament. He clowned Tobizaru, right? He can compete at this level, no question. He's going to have more difficult matchups, which means he's going to lose more of them. So I don't think you can really count on him getting another double-digit victory basho, but a winning record, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty safe bet for him. Look for him to be Komusubi unless something weird happens, he goes 8-7, gets moved to Maegashira 1 East, whatever, but I think he has a very real chance to be a Komusubi in the next basho. Midorifuji, D tier. Let's just be honest about this. Midorifuji is very, very good, very, very skilled, and very, very small. It's like this. When he faces guys who have a skill set that can get close to his, but also the physicality and the athleticism to not get abused by his speed, he doesn't do well. When he steps up into the Joy, especially the high Joy, he tends to struggle. Now, not every time. If you look at it from a certain perspective, he did have a tournament at Maegashira 1 West where he was 7-8, which is almost a winning record. And then he went to 3 West and he was 8-7, and that is a winning record. But that's not something you want to rely on. He's 2 East, he's going to get all the toughest opponents really early, and all of those tough opponents are getting better and better with every basho. This does not set up well for him. It's probably not going to be a terrible record. I think he's going to get at least 6 wins and very possibly 7, but a winning record is very, very unlikely at this rank for this guy. Abi, almost permanent C+ tier. In fact, maybe I should put him at C+ tier whenever he's in the Joy and C- when he's in the Sanyaku. He is the guy, more than anyone I can think of, that takes full advantage of situations where he's in Maegashira, maybe struggles against the Sanyaku, and then takes advantage of the reduced competition level if he struggles to come back and have a good record by the end. In the Sanyaku, he doesn't get that advantage, and he ends up struggling a little more often. He's going to yo-yo between those 2 spots, like Komusubi and High Maegashira, for a while. There's always a little bit of an injury question with him because there are bashos where his arm seems fine and bashos where it seems like it very much isn't. But I don't know enough about what's going on with him since his arm surgery to say that he is definitely some kind of an injury risk. He does his thing, he does it at the same level, and it has 6 to 9 win results basically all the time. If you want to call him C-, okay, but he's basically some kind of C tier. Gonoyama, C+. If we went by Gonoyama's results in September, when he went 9-6 at Maegashira 5, I might want to go C- with this. He had a couple of Sanyaku matches, actually he had 4 of them, but he lost to Takakeisho, he lost to Hoshoryu, he lost to Daieisho, and he lost to Tobizaru. Most of his wins in that tournament were against a little bit weaker competition, and so stepping up to this level would have looked a little bit dangerous for anybody who is a big fan of his and wants to see him get a winning record. However, in November, he went 8-7, but he had a much tougher lineup of guys to face. He started out slow, 1-4, but then he beat Kirishima, he beat Takakeisho, he beat Wakamotoharu. Along the way, he beat Tobizaru, he beat Hokutofuji. At the end, he beat Shonannoumi for his Kachikoshi, and these are all guys that he's likely to fight in this basho. Maybe not Shonannoumi, it depends how that works out, but all the other guys are right in his range. Those are very, very likely or basically guaranteed matches. Even though this is going to be his toughest basho to date, the schedule lines up in such a way where, unless he starts out very, very poorly, he should probably be at least, we'll say 3-5 by day 8. And from there, with a lot of the Sanyaku out of the way, he, I believe, should be able to take on a lot more Maegashira guys, get a lot of those wins that he needs. There are guys under him in rank who are going to be tough opponents, but I think he can handle that. I see him, another 8-7 record seems like a pretty good bet for him. Hokutofuji, C-. You know I love me some Captain Faceplant, but that run at Komusubi showed that maybe the wheels fell off the Cinderella carriage. If you look at his record, okay, 5-10 at Komusubi, not great, but as I've said many times, a Komusubi schedule tends to be a lot tougher than even very high Maegashira. But let's look at his wins. He beat Wakamotoharu, which on paper a good win, but Waka obviously struggled overall. Abi, who did very poorly, Meisei, who may have been terribly injured, we'll never know, Meisei never shows anything, Asanoyama, who was straight up broken, and Onisho, who was also straight up broken. So even though he beat guys who are known good wrestlers, he didn't beat anybody who was actually performing well at the time of their match. And a lot of the guys he faced last time, he's going to face this time. Furthermore, Ura, the one guy who a lot of people in the Joy are going to be looking at as the guy in the Sanyaku they can beat, does amazingly well against Hokutofuji, so that's not even a real positive for him either. At 3 West, he could start out poorly enough that he gets taken off the Sanyaku schedule a little early, so he manages to skip maybe one guy, but that could easily turn into a lower ranked Maegashira guy who he's much more able to beat. That could be the difference between a winning and a losing record. I don't like his chances of doing particularly well here though, unless he somehow finds that magic that he had at Maegashira 7 in those contender matches at the higher ranks, or at Maegashira 1 when he started out super hot even though he beat 3 Ozeki to start and then still only finished 8-7. If that guy comes back, cool, I'm just not expecting it. Low C-. Tobizaru, C+. I would be tempted to put him at B if there was a larger Sanyaku and he was still at this rank. The problem here is that with only 8 Sanyaku and 2 now who may not fight, that means he's much more likely to fight all of the rest. And the rest can generally pose a problem for him. He'll beat some of them, no doubt. And if Takakeisho does fight, despite not being 100%, Tobi should feast on him. The monkey eats the hamster, you know how that is. Is that a thing? I don't know. Anyway, the overall Sanyaku lineup is going to be tough, but he has enough guys around him that he can maybe make up for that. But he also has some tough guys just below him in rank, once you get into rank 6 and 7, that maybe it's not such a given he'll do really well against them. So there is some tough opposition that he's capable of beating, but not to the degree that I think we can really rely on him taking a winning record. But I would put him with Wakamotoharu in that 85-ish% chance of getting a Kachikoshi. Shodai, C-. Now this may be a little unfair. I had him at C+ for a while, and then I just kept looking at the guys around him, and I'm like, is he really that likely to beat enough of these opponents that he's going to end up with a winning record? And the answer, as it often is with Shodai, is he should, but I don't know if he will. Especially when you look at the fact that really big, tough guys that he cannot manhandle that easily, like Kinbozan, like Asanoyama, are below him in rank. If he does reasonably well, he might end up with Atamifuji, Gonoyama. These guys should be able to beat him too. As with Tobizaru, because the Sanyaku is smaller, and especially in his case, if guys drop out or don't fight at all in the tournament, that makes him more likely to fight the rest of the Sanyaku, and that's going to be bad for him too. There are just a lot of ways for him to end up with a losing record, even though at this rank he shouldn't. Having seen him fight well in the past, I still feel like I'm selling him short, but he sells himself short even more, so we're not going any better than C- for him. Ryuden, C-. Outside of the Joy, Ryuden should be a little bit of a better pick. And even with the smaller Senyaku at 5 East, he shouldn't really get that many Senyaku matchups unless he's doing really well, in which case C- is not the right rank for him. But he's got Kinbozan and Shonannoumi, Asanoyama behind him. He's got some guys just in front of him who could give him trouble, even though he, to the best of my knowledge, has never had a reported injury in the recent past. There are bashos where he looks like he's just not right, where it looks like something's wrong. There's no obvious injury. There's no report of an injury, so I'm not going to put him as an injury risk. But if that Ryuden comes back at all, this dude could crater to 5 and 10. I don't know if he's going to do that badly, but there's more danger around that Maegashira 5 rank this time than there usually is. He'll always battle. Listen, I can talk all the shit about him that I want, but I'll never take away from him the fact that he always comes to fight. That is true, and that's probably going to save him in a few of his matches. But I can't quite give him a 50% chance to hit a Kachikoshi. 35-40% seems like a more likely number to stick to him. Nishikigi, C+. Now, he went 7 and 8 last basho at 4 West, which is sort of outside the joy, so you might wonder why I'm saying he is probably going to get a winning record here. Well, it's like this. He lost the first 2 days, okay, and then he won 6 matches in a row. He beat Abi, he beat Shonannoumi, who he'll almost certainly face this time, Takanosho, Hokuseiho, who he'll probably fight this time, Kinbozan, who he'll definitely face, and Hoshoryu, who he's done really well against of late. So he's 6 and 2 at that point. Now, being just squeaked into the joy, he did end up having to face the other 2 Ozeki, who beat him. Alright, 6 and 4. But because of that hot start, he was then put up against a lot of contenders. So he ended up losing to Ryuden, losing to Ichiyamamoto, losing to Tsurugisho, losing to Wakamotoharu, and he's gonna fight Ryuden and Ichiyamamoto in this basho, on top of Asanoyama being right there. Against the rank and file, I think Nishikigi has proven that he's good enough you can probably expect a winning record. But there are enough guys around him who could give him trouble that even though he shouldn't end up against Senyaku opposition unless he starts out super hot, it's not really a given he's going to get that winning record. But I'd say 70 to 75% odds. He's a solid C+ pick here. Kinbozan, C+. Kinbozan's biggest weakness is that he just doesn't figure out how to fight against specific opponents all that well or all that quickly. It took getting his ass beat by Hokuseiho over and over and over, and probably watching my video on Hokuseiho, to realize that if he just goes at the guy, he can win, and he won easily the last time out. Now that's good, because that's a probable opponent in January for him, but then you look at his loss to Ichiyamamoto, where at that point, he or his coaches, probably his coaches, should have pointed out that Ichi was really jumping the gun on the Tachi and he should have been ready for it, and he absolutely was not. Is he going to figure that out because he's going to fight Ichiyamamoto again? Well, hopefully. He's got the physical skills to get a winning record here. He should get a winning record here. He should be able to beat enough guys that he's a safe B-tier pick, but he's not because he just loses matches he shouldn't. I think that will change. He's not one of those guys who I think is going to spin his wheels forever and never ever ever learn, but he's kind of got to prove himself a little bit more first. Right now, he still looks like a 7-8, 8-7 guy all the time. Looking at his probable opposition, I put him a little bit into C+. Shonannoumi, C-. There's not much to say here. He's good, but he was the forgotten man coming up with Gonoyama and Hakuoho, and we're starting to see little by little that that is for good reason. He's not keeping up with Gonoyama, he's not reaching the level that Hakuoho is expected to reach. He looks like a guy who can sit comfortably just outside the joy and yo-yo slightly up and down, getting 69 wins all the time, sometimes moving up into the joy, and then getting slapped around and bumped back down. He's already enormous and very strong and in his mid-20s, so it's hard to see him becoming more of a physical beast. That means his skill set has to improve, and while I think it can, we have to actually see that happen before we expect more out of him. This is his level. I just think the opposition around him is tougher now than it could be in other bashos, C-. Ichiyamamoto, D tier. His 11 and 4 last time was great. It was really good to see that the committee didn't stick him against Senyaku opponents all the time, even when he was clearly not on the level to contend anymore. They gave him some winnable fights and he won them. Now, This is where we're gonna run into a problem. He beat some guys who he's gonna fight this time, but he beat them, and I'm looking directly at Nishikigi and Kinbozan with this, by getting gargantuan jumps on the Tachiai. The Gyoji should have false started those and didn't, but his opponents should have been ready for him as well. Maybe not Nishikigi because he hadn't done it that much or that aggressively earlier, but definitely Kinbozan. There's no excuse for getting taken advantage of in that way on day 15. I just find it hard to believe that the coaches of the guys he's going to fight aren't going to have seen what he was doing and teaching their guys, get your damn fists down and up quick. Don't let him hit you that fast. Don't let him get that kind of an advantage, because the Gyoji will not protect you here. Unless a bunch of coaches and a bunch of wrestlers just fail to learn that lesson, it is impossible to see how Ichiyamamoto is going to get a winning record short of falling apart early and then just being able to feast on rank 14 to 17 guys with losing records for enough days that he can just squeak out an 8 and 7. But the path to that is just too thin. D tier, and much like with Uri, even though I'm not as big of an Ichiyamamoto fan, I would give him all the props in the world if he could come up with a Kachikoshi here. It's just not likely to happen. Asanoyama, S injury tier. Apparently his right arm is feeling better. He seems to be doing okay with it. Although, according to Chris Sumo's coverage, he's been working on an inside left grip, which you gotta think he might not be doing that so much if his right arm was really solid. Apparently his calf tear is also okay, but not great. At Maegashira 7, you look at the guys around him, Asanoyama should absolutely clown this group. When he came back into Makuuchi, he went 12 and 3 at Maegashira 14, and even though this is a higher rank with, yes, tougher competition around him, A tier is 10 wins. And I think there's no question that even an 80% healthy Asanoyama could get those 10 wins against this group. Where this could fall short is if he starts stomping them out early, ends up with higher ranked opposition, and especially if he gets a few Sanyaku opponents, and he's only in that maybe 80% healthy range, that could start to be a problem. That might stop him short of 10 wins. But with any kind of quote-unquote normal schedule, or if he drops a couple early so that he doesn't get the eye of Sauron glaring at him, 10 wins should be a minimum for him, unless he's just too hurt. If you think his health is good enough, and I do think we can rely on him being healthy enough to succeed, 15 days should make him an excellent pick at this rank. Hokuseiho, C+. I had him at C- for a while because I was being a hater. But when you look at who a guy is likely to fight, you have to look up the ranks, but you also have to look down the ranks. At Maegashira 8, man, there are just a lot of guys who might not be able to beat him because he's such a presence, even though he doesn't do much. Is Hiradoumi gonna beat him? Maybe, but that's tough. Mitakeumi? Maybe, but that's tough. Meisei? Same. Sadanoumi? Same. Tsurugisho? Same. All of these guys can beat him, but if he digs in enough and gets the right position, they might not. He could get himself into a position where any offense they have stalls and they just can't find a way to win. And then there's also the possibility going into every basho that maybe Hakuho put some kind of new trick in his head that he can try to make work. We can only dream, right? In any case, he's a very low C+ tier. I just think there are enough guys under him in rank and enough guys even further down he can take advantage of if he struggles early, that there's a pretty good chance he ends up with a winning record, whether or not we watch him fight and think he deserves it. Hiradoumi, C-. Asanoyama is right above him. Shonannoumi is right above him. Kinbozan is close enough that they should end up fighting. He's 0-4 against Hokuseiho. Yeah, there are guys he's gonna beat, but the problem he has with guys who are just too big and too physical for him to be effective against is gonna rear its ugly head. There is the potential for enough matches that are winnable that I don't want to D-tier him here, but there are going to be a lot of matches that he does everything he can, because that's what he does, honey badger that he is, and it just isn't enough. He's very solidly placed in C- for this basho. Mitakeumi, C+. At Maegashira 9, he's well set up to do pretty decently in this basho. He's fought Hokuseiho once and beat him, and once guys beat him once, they seem to know how to do it again. You go down the ranks, you see Meisei, Tamawashi. If they're healthy, they could be trouble, but are they going to be? I don't know. Sadanoumi, Tsurugisho, like these are all guys who, yeah, they could beat him, but he's got the skill set and still enough strength, especially if his arm isn't acting up too badly, that he should be able to get a lot of wins in the early days. If he has a losing record at day 9, that is to say if he has no more than 4 wins at day 9, that's not a great sign. But if that happens, there's a good chance he ends up fighting down in rank against guys who are also struggling. He could go up in rank too, I don't know, so let's not count on that. But there are a lot of ways he can end up with a winning record here. I think he's got a really good chance at it. I'd probably put him just behind Wakamotoharu and Tobizaru in terms of odds for that. Meisei, B, injury risk. Meisei has occasionally had tournaments where he's struggled badly in the Joy. In March 2022, he went 1-14 at Maegashira 3. He dropped all the way to 13, went 8-7. At 10, he went 9-6. He had winning records, and he wasn't fighting poorly by any means. It seemed pretty safe that he was going to get those winning records. He's competitive in the Joy, sort of, sometimes. But once he's outside the Joy, especially well outside, he tends to do pretty well. He doesn't necessarily clown everybody and get 10-11 wins, but he should be a safe B-tier winning record guy if he's okay. Problem is, his 1-14 at Maegashira 3, it was reported later that he had a bad back. The 4-11 at Maegashira 2 he had in November, we gotta figure probably something similar is going on, because he could not get anything done. So I'm looking at a low end where he's sort of recovered, he's doing all right, but he's got low enough end competition that he should be able to beat them even at less than 100%. If he's feeling closer to 100%, this might be a double-digit pick. But if he's really not okay, even worse than he was after that 1-14, this could get a little rough. He's definitely an injury risk until we see at least one strong basho out of him. But at this rank, he should be good if healthy. Tamawashi, C+. He has a lot of winnable fights early, and I think he is in that Wakamotoharu, Tobizaru kind of 85% chance of getting a winning record range. If you trust his health, if you trust that what we saw from him in November is more what we're going to get than what we saw from him in September, he's a pretty good pick. The only thing is that once you get outside of the couple ranks around him, you start to see some dangerous opponents. Asanoyama's there. Asanoyama will probably beat him if he's even close to healthy. Churanoumi beat him pretty easily last time. If he ends up getting bumped down a little bit for some reason, say he's struggling, then he ends up walking into Kotoshouho, Onosato, those are going to be tough matches for him. He goes up a little further, Kinbozan. If he hits contender status, the schedule could get real tough, but at that point he's probably safely with a winning record. I think there are plenty of routes where he could end up with at least 8 wins. He's a safe pick, but there are some ways I could see this working out at like a 7-8 record. I think 7 is his floor though. If you want a really safe pick, Tamawashi is a good one. Sadanoumi, C-. After he got his Junyusho in 2022 and managed to stick at the just outside the Joy ranks for a couple of bashos, everything has kind of gone south. He had 4 straight losing records, although none of them were terrible until his 5-10 in July. But since then, at Maegashira 12, he was 8-7. At 11, he was 8-7. Now at 10 West, he's just close enough to some dangerous opponents above him that could be enough to swing him back towards 7-8, maybe 6-9 record. If I wanted to include C+ and C- and just a middle C tier, that's where Sadanoumi would go. I struggled with him. He's so 50-50 that it's hard to know which side of the line to put him on. And to some degree, I kind of put him on the C- side just because I have more on the C+ side, and there have to be some guys who are going to have losing records. When I look at the C tier guys, I just think he's one of the more likely ones. But he's probably 40% to get a Kachikoshi. Tsurugisho, C, injury risk. We don't know how many legs he's fighting on. That's really what it comes down to. The last time he was even this high, he only went 5-10, but you look at who he's likely to fight, and he's got a chance at a winning record. But if he's fighting on effectively no legs, he's gonna get absolutely annihilated. He's actually more like C- injury risk. Just to be as fair as possible to him, he's improved and been more forceful with his sumo in recent bashos. I don't want to take that away from him, but at the same time, he's either a okay pick when he's healthy at this rank or a terrible pick if he's any kind of not healthy. He's better avoided. If you don't want to think about injuries, just consider him D tier. Oho, C-. Can't trust him. I said before the last basho that he should be an A tier pick. Minimum B, but A tier. Because at Maegashira 12, he should be able to bang on the dudes around him and really pull together an excellent record. What happened? He beat Hiradoumi, he lost to Sadanoumi, but Sadanoumi is trouble for him. Also, I think I was saying Sadanoumi's name wrong the whole time, and I apologize. He lost to Terunofuji, which shouldn't happen, frankly, for him at all. He lost to Kotonowaka, which, okay, that's fine, that's sort of an even fight. Beat Myogiryu, lost to Ryuden, Ryuden was doing well, okay, fine. And then, and this was a big reason for that potential A-tier thinking, he got Nishikigi, he got Roga, he got Tomokaze, he got Kotonowaka, took care of them all. Okay, at that point he's 6-4. Pretty good, pretty good. He can beat Hokuseiho. In fact, I can't think of too many guys who could go 2-1 against Hokuseiho, see what he does, watch him on tape, have that experience, and then dive directly into his arms the way Oho did in their match. It was insanity, and he still almost won. That was a terrible, terrible loss. It was so bad. He lost to Tamawashi, okay, and then he lost to Tohakuryu. And they were 2-2 before, so it wasn't like a gimme, but he just stood there. He just stood there and got slapped until he got pushed out of the ring. Any aggression at all would have beaten Tohakuryu. Anything. He could have beat Hokuseiho and Tohakuryu, and you look at the rest of his schedule, the way it turned out, that's 10 wins. That's 10 wins right there. He still ended up 8-7. He's maddening. He's absolutely maddening. But now he doesn't have all of those Juryo scrubs to take advantage of because the guys who came up, number one, are out of his range. He's at Maegashira 11, he's not going to drop down to face most of them. If he does face any of them, who's he going to get? Kotoshouho, who, the way Kotoshouho is fighting, should absolutely beat his ass. Onosato should run him over. If the guys around Oho who have struggled with injuries are the least bit healthy, he should get cracked hard. And yet, he's got the talent that we shouldn't be thinking of him like that. When I say he should get cracked hard, it's only on the basis of how he normally fights, not what he could fight like if he fought at his best all the time. He's frustrating. Maybe I'll get over it someday. I don't know, but he's C-. There's too many ways for him to just find losses, because that's what he does. He finds losses. Takanosho, C, injury risk. Apparently he's looking pretty good in practice. Apparently his knee surgery went well. But at best, that just puts him at the level that he had been previously, which was a guy who went 8-7, 7-8, and 8-7 all the time at these mid to low Maegashira ranks. There's really no reason to see him differently now. He's just more of a risk because of his recent injury taking him out of the November Basho. Unlike Tsurugisho, I don't think you should treat him as D tier even if you're ignoring injuries, but he's low C. Definitely C- at best. Probably stay away from him too. Myogiryu, C+. I gave him C+ rather than C- simply because I have no idea how he's going to do when he keeps facing basically the same guys all the time. All I know is that when he's at Maegashira 9-10, he tends to do terribly, 6-9, 5-10. When he's at 13-14, he's been getting 10s and 5s, 9-6s, 12, maybe here he gets an 8-7. Look, it's hard to know when a guy is going to fall apart physically, and he is on the older side. He still seems reasonably healthy though. He's still going to compete. He probably gets 8 wins. My call for Myogiryu is that he's going to finish with 7 or 8 wins. I think that's, I can say more reliably than he's going to have a winning record or a losing record. That's how 50-50 he is. He's an okay pick for games where you need a long lineup of guys and you're just not sure who to go with, or if you do that sort of fantasy football-ish draft sumo where each wrestler can only go to one person. But all you can expect from him is a reliable effort. The results will be what they are. Churanoumi, C-, and even this is a little bit out of respect for his previous basho. He went 9-6 against probably everybody's expectations, but you gotta look at who he beat. Like, he started out super hot. He started out 7-2. He beat Roga, Kotonowaka, Nishikigi, and Tomokaze after Tomokaze started gimping around a little bit more. He beat Endo on day 9, and Endo looked terrible, like his knees fell apart again. He beat Terunofuji, who wasn't having a great tournament, but is, more legit. And he beat Tamawashi. The Tamawashi win was really good. That was really strong. And that Tamawashi win is actually a big reason of why I'm not just D-tiering him, because it showed that he can fight in a pretty legit way against very legit guys. Like, he went straight at Tamawashi's face and just beat him. Okay, he didn't just have to take advantage of the Juryo scrubs that came up alongside him. After that, his competition got tougher and everything went as you might have expected. Mitakeumi beat him, Atamifuji beat him, Hiradoumi beat him, Oho beat him, he beat Sadanoumi, and then, incredibly, he beat Midorifuji on day 15. That one was really good too. So he's got some hope. He might be the next guy who stays near the bottom of the division but is able to be a Makuuchi wrestler. We'll see. But that doesn't mean he's likely to have a winning record here. He's staring Kotoshouho and Onosato dead in the face. He'll get Tomokaze before halfway through the tournament this time, most likely, which could be a tougher matchup. He's got Onosho, Endo. If they're healthy, they're probably going to be an issue. He'll probably fight Oho, and he might even get Tamawashi, who probably won't be taken by surprise again. Even though he's near the bottom of the division, the schedule is looking potentially very tough. His most likely shot at a winning record is if the guys who are dealing with injuries, or were dealing with them in November, haven't recovered enough to cause him issues. But somehow, when these guys struggle at high ranks because of injuries, they manage to pull themselves together at lower ranks and succeed. I don't like Churanoumi's odds, but I'm giving him the props of his November performance to put him above D tier. Don't expect too much though. Endo. B, injury risk. This is extremely simple. Endo is Maegashira 13. Endo is much better than this rank. Even with a couple of guys near him that might give him problems even when he's healthy, he was obviously not healthy last Basho. Has he recovered? I have no idea. If he has, he should spank this crew real good. If he's not, it might not go great. I don't think he's going to do so poorly under any circumstances that he ends up in Juryo. But remember, it was only back in May that he won 0 fights and dropped out with 2 sprained knees. And again, I ask, how do you sprain both knees at once? And Maegashira 8, where he was last Basho, is not that difficult of a rank relatively speaking, and he only went 5 and 10. Again, he looked terrible. A healthy Endo is an easy call for a winning record, but he is very caveat emptor. You are taking your chances with him. Kotoshouho, B tier. Never imagined I would put him here at any rank, but he turned an 0-2 record in November, which those losses were to Aoyama and Bushozan, and while those guys are marginal Makuuchi guys at best, they are Makuuchi guys. They did come up along with him this time, and spun that into a 12-3 Yusho in Juryo. The skill gap is real, and the one time he stepped up to face a Makuuchi guy was Nishikigi, who was obviously not in a good state and doing very poorly, and he won that fight. But the thing is, this Kotoshouho is not the same one that I remember seeing before his June Yusho especially. He's fighting with more confidence, and although it's easier to do that when you know the guys are below your level, having success against lower levels with tactics, with reactions, with whatever he's using exactly to get his wins can often allow for more confidence at higher levels, which can lead to more success at higher levels. The biggest thing is he beat Onosato twice. You'll see in the breakdown Onosato has holes in his game that Kotoshouho was able to take advantage of, but the guys at the bottom of Makuuchi are not perfect. If Kotoshouho is able to develop a good game plan against a physically dominant presence like Onosato, he can do that against a lot of the guys around him at the bottom of Makuuchi, and I think he will. Calling 8 wins for him minimum actually feels pretty safe. I would be very surprised if he did worse than that. I still think Onosato is the better option, and we'll get to him in a second, for this bottom of the division bracket, but not by as much as he should be. Kotoshouho, safe B tier pick, calling it now. Onosho, B injury risk. Essentially the same story as Endo. He is more than good enough to take winning records here and take them easily when he's healthy, but his knees have to be in some kind of functional shape, and we have no idea if they will be. Tomokaze, C, injury risk. I had him as B tier last time, and he showed why for the first 7 days. Now, granted, part of that was because he was facing a bunch of guys coming up from Juryo, and I knew he was better than them. He went 5 and 2 in the first 7 days, but 3 of those wins were against Tohakuryu, Kotonowaka, and Roga. He actually ended up not facing all of those guys coming up from Juryo. His losses were to Tsurugisho before he damaged his other knee, and Ichiyamamoto, so no shame there. Then he lost to Churanoumi, and then he was just kind of gimping around, like nothing looked right after that. He looked very capable of getting a winning record, but again, the competition at the absolute bottom of the division was as weak as you could hope for it to be. One thing I didn't know at the time was that the boot on his foot, I knew he had injured his knee. What I didn't know was that his foot is basically paralyzed. He's fighting on one foot actually and truly. It's kind of nuts. But for that reason, it's hard to see him as even a B tier pick when he's fighting at what is now full strength for him. I think he's probably C+ when he's doing well. But given that type of injury, I think he should always, until it looks like it just doesn't affect him anymore, he should always be on an injury risk level. So in this case, C injury risk, he's not a terrible pick, but when you look at the guys around him this time as opposed to last time, there are better options. And now let's get to one of those better options. Onosato. I played with him being S tier, but I think he's A tier. Kotoshouho is the main reason for that. Of all the guys towards the bottom of the division, Kotoshouho is the one who looks most capable of matching or outperforming Onosato in this basho in terms of wins and losses. Again, if you think Endo or Onosho's health is to be trusted, maybe they can keep up as well. But Onosato is not going to do quite what people are expecting him to do. There are too many holes in his game, and unless the Nishonoseki team has managed to clean up a lot of his problems between November and the start of the January basho, he's going to be taken advantage of at least a few times. I still think he's going to get double digits fairly easily. There are too many guys who are just going to stand in front of him and get hit and let him push him out, but he's going to take a few surprising losses like he did in Juryo, and that means he's not exactly S tier. I think he's S tier for anything that isn't a bracket game where you need guys from throughout the division, but in terms of brackets, Kotoshouho, there's an argument for him there. But if you pick anyone else from Maegashira 11 on down besides one of those two guys, you're trolling. Takarafuji. C+. I have no reason for this pick other than old man stubbornness, and he's not ready to leave the division yet. I think he's slightly above 50%, and it's basically because at this point in his career, he knows when to fight, when not to fight, and he should have just enough guys where he'll know to fight that he can get those 8 wins. In fact, I'm not calling this as a prediction, but don't be surprised if Onosato tries to bulldoze Takarafuji directly out of the ring, looks like he's going to succeed, and then Takarafuji pulls that old Tawara ballet on him and drops him out in front of him. Bushozan, D tier. Meatball no win in Makuuchi is bad. Ugh. Shimazuumi, C-. Shimazuumi does not have a long and outstanding track record in Juryo. Well, I guess long maybe, he's been there since January of 2022, but in 2 years he never managed double-digit wins. He just slowly climbed the ranks, He had 4 winning records in a row, and by Banzuke luck managed to get from Juryo 13 to Juryo 3 with 3 8-7s and a 9-6. Then at 3 he went 5-10, but only dropped to Juryo 6, and then had 9 wins twice to make his way into Makuuchi. He has shown 0 dominance at the Juryo level, which should make him incredibly vulnerable here in the Makuuchi level. And I don't put his odds of a winning record as being all that high. But having watched Juryo for several bashos now, he seems more and more comfortable with his style, which is forward, forward, always forward. His balance is slowly getting better. He's less likely to fall for tricks. Churanoumi came in last basho and started blasting people in a very surprising way. I'm not sure that Shimazuumi will do that, but he's sure as hell gonna try. And I don't think he has that terrible of a chance to do it. I'm putting his odds at a winning record at around 25%, and I wouldn't be shocked if things work out in such a way that he ends up going 7-8, but gets saved by only dropping to Maegashira 17 West next time. And finally, Aoyama. I'm sorry for all the Big Dan fans, but he's D tier. He went 8-7 at Juryo 1 East, and that's the only reason he got bumped up to Makuuchi at all. His losses weren't terrible. He lost to Shimazuumi, he lost to Bushozan, who are both coming up. He lost to Kotonowaka when he was the one visiting Makuuchi, lost to Onosato, lost to Chiyoshima, Daishoho, Toki Hayate. So apart from Toki Hayate, those are all guys who are or have been in Makuuchi. So that's not a terrible set of losses, but it is a lot of losses to some very marginal guys. You look at who's surrounding him at the bottom of the division, and outside of Bushozan, again, who beat him, the competition is just way more dangerous. It's fun seeing Tetas Grandes hanging around, but he's going to be hanging around in Juryo after this tournament. And that's it for the tier list. As always, comments. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? Are we way off on something? Let us know. The Onosato breakdown is coming. It's scripted, everything's clipped out, just gotta do the editing. I would like it done by Thursday, but Friday morning US time seems like a more likely release. So look forward to that. Otherwise, have a great day, and I will see you soon.